I now call the May 12th, 2015 work session of the City of Riverton Council at 6:05 p.m. And Councilmember Larson is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then if we'll remain standing, he'll give us an invocation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our Father in heaven, we beseech thee this night that thou might bless us with insight and understanding to review and to view the budget of this coming year. Father, we would ask that thou would be mindful of all of us, that we might benefit our citizens of Riverton and help them in whatever way we possibly can. Father, we're thankful for the opportunity to serve, and we say this humbly, name thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Would the city clerk please conduct the roll call?
Yes, Your Honor. Councilman Martin Canan.
Here.
Councilman Jonathan Fabian.
Here.
Councilman Lee Martinez.
Here.
Councilman Kyle Larson.
Here.
Councilwoman Holly Gibbon. Here. Mayor John Lars Baker.
I am present. I declare that we have a quorum. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda for this evening's activities.
Your Honor, I'd move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mayor votes aye. The agenda has been passed, and there's one item on the agenda. Okay, City Administrator's report.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Mayor and Council and citizens of the Riverton. I'm pleased to present you tonight the City of Riverton's budget 2015, fiscal year 2015-16. The budget before you is divided into 11 sections. We've got overview, general fund, enterprise funds, fixed costs, administrative allocations, contract for services, employee compensation, fixed assets, capital reserves, and a conclusion. So we're going to do things a little bit different tonight in that we're going to do capital first. I do have to show this one picture for you. This is like my favorite picture. And this is by Sandy Lures. She took this picture of our rendezvous days. I just think that's the coolest picture with the fire going in the back and the clouds in the back. And so looking forward to a great summer and here in Riverton. I always have to have a budget quote. This is by Benjamin Franklin. He says, gain may be temporary and uncertain, but ever while you live, expense is constant and certain. So I think this quote is especially relevant in today's economy. Your financial stability might be secure one day and ruined the next. You never know when you could lose your job or suddenly win $1 million jackpot. No matter what your current financial situation is, you know that you always have expenses to pay, and you should factor that into your daily life regardless of your personal wealth. So that's just kind of a somewhat related to the budget. So we're going to do capital tonight. First, we have a couple of staff people here that can present. So I'm just going to kind of do an overview and hit on a few, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tim. He's back doing the videotape right now. He's going to come and talk about two of the projects that are IT related, and then it will go to. Then we're just going to go through the different funds. So we'll be in general fund. So I'll turn it over to Kyle. He'll do the rest of them in there, and then we'll do water and wastewater, and that will be from Don Wilhelm, and then back to Kyle, and he'll do sanitation and airport. So our capital budget increased this year to $16,134,150. Obviously, the biggest chunk of this is our airport runway project at almost $13 million. So that's the big component of our capital projects. So if you look in the back of your budget workbook, there's a summary page that lists each of the items, along with a description and how much is budgeted for those. And then if you look in the very back page, there's this kind of a spreadsheet that lists all of them all on one page, and then it's divided up to tell you how they're being paid for, if they're coming out of supplemental funding, if they're city funds, countywide consensus funds, or other grants that we're getting from state agencies. And so, let's see. So I'm going to talk about two in the general fund. The first is the carpeting. This project has come up the last couple years for the city, and it's just kind of been, there's other priorities that have hit it. I don't know if you've walked around City Hall, but there's a lot of areas in City Hall where the creases are coming apart, where where it goes up against the wall, it's actually receding from there, and you can actually see the concrete through there. And so what we're trying to do here is get some money in here to get some new carpet into City Hall. This was originally placed here when the building was remodeled approximately 20 years ago. So it's had a fairly good life, and it actually, in the grand scheme of things, looks pretty good for 20-year-old carpet. We're proposing doing this project in 2 years. The first year would be the administration side of the building, and the second year would be the police and municipal court side of the building. We received a quote of $90,000 for the entire building, but we believe by using the multi-year phase, along with the existing personnel and removing carpet, molding, and furniture, we can have quite a savings. So we're only proposing $45,000 for the carpet. The next one is the fleet capital, and this is a couple of different items. We have 2 police cars in there. That's something we've tried to do every year since I've been here, and I think they did that before, is always replace 2 police cars every year, because they get a lot of miles, a lot of use on them, and in order to keep up on that, we've got to replace those. And then we have a 1 police staff car that is often used for long distance trainings. Those are getting high mileage. So that's a total of $90,000 between the 2 police cars and the 1 staff car. We also have 1 industrial mower for the Parks Division. We got to keep those up and running. As you notice in our budget, you'll see that we have quite a bit of substantial and maintenance of taking care of these, and so we need to start replacing some of them. The other one is a Gator utility vehicle for the Parks Division. Oftentimes those are much easier, they're cheaper to buy, and they can be used a lot more efficiently than a car or a truck. So is there any questions on those 2 items that I brought up? Okay, if not, I will ask Tim Hugas to come. He's our network administrator to discuss IT projects.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, everyone. There are 2 capital projects within the IT realm that we'd like to see this year. One we've nicknamed the ambiguous network link, I think, but it's really Ubiquity, and that's just a brand name of equipment. And essentially what it does is connects our airport interests with additional bandwidth. So there aren't a lot of service options for high-speed internet and even private network infrastructure, if you will, up on the airport plateau. And so we have radio links that connect City Hall to Griffey Hill to the DCI building, which we own. And then we have implemented a fiber link from that building over to the airport, and then radio links from the airport terminal proper to the ARF station. So our employees at the ARF station rely on this for all of their communications. So it's telephones, it's corporate applications like our daytime stuff, timesheets, electronic timesheets, our email, police applications for the security that our TSA guys help with up there, that sort of thing. So we have this radio link. We have more bandwidth coming to City Hall than we can pipe up there. And this set of radios, I think in your report, I said it was 10 times the bandwidth as what we currently have. I didn't do proper math. It's really closer to 7 times. But it would become our major link. The radios that we're using now would become our secondary links because we don't like to have single source connectivity with all that activity going on up there. And then it would let us kill a point-to-point circuit that we're using to do a lot of that stuff now. So just terminating that circuit in itself would pay for this project in just a little under 3 years. One other thing that we didn't put in the report is the water treatment plant suffers terribly from lack of internet services for the same reason. They have the same size circuit. We have a camera feed from J.C. Park security cameras on their little link, telephones, and a number of PCs. And so with this larger radio infrastructure update that we're proposing, we would follow that up with a small set of radios that would just link the Griffey Hill Tower to the water treatment plant, and we would be able to add significant amount of bandwidth to those folk, also killing our existing circuit there, and that would pay off in like 1 year. So it's kind of a part one, immediate or a sooner kind of a thing, and then additionally we would leverage this infrastructure with greater benefit, and then that would just continue to save us, $3,000 to $6,000 a year thereafter. So we think that makes good sense. Any questions about that? The second, I think, on the capital list for IT was server storage only upgrade. We're running server 2008, and we've got about 6 years of life out of the servers that we have now. We're approaching the time within the next year or two that we'll be needing to update those, and we like to do things slightly proactively when it comes to things that we all depend on a lot. So what this would do, it would buy sort of a mass storage component, if you will, and it would offload what we'll propose as phase 2 server updates a year or so from now. It would probably reduce the overall project by about half. So it's just saving us a hit. It's providing some storage that we can utilize now and paving the way for that phase 2 that'll come another year or so down the pike. Questions regarding that? Thanks for your consideration.
Good evening, Your Honor, City Council. As I work through these projects, perhaps the best way to do this is I will provide a brief summary. If you have any questions at that time, please feel free to ask. If not, I'll move on to the next project. And I'll just work through the order that's listed in your workbook before you. The first capital project listed under the general fund associated with Public Works Department is the Big Bend Drain Improvement. This is a project that has been in the works for some time. It is in relation to the South Federal improvements, and as you are aware, stormwater from that improvement is being diverted into the Big Bend Drain, and we have to improve a number of the culverts and build a detention pond to handle the 100-year flood for that project. The cost estimate is $500,000, and staff has secured $300,000 in countywide consensus monies to support that project.
Is the land already acquired for the retaining ponds?
Yes, Your Honor, that's correct. It was purchased this current fiscal year, and in fact, this project is going to be opened tomorrow. It's currently out for bid. So we will begin this project this current fiscal year and complete it next fiscal year.
Thank you.
Moving on, the next project is the Willow Creek Offsite Improvements. As you're aware, the Willow Creek Elementary School is going to be built this upcoming year. We're excited for that. As part of that project, the school district is improving a portion of South Major Avenue. Prior to that work being done, the city has an interest in improving a culvert associated with the Big Bend drainage system that runs beneath South Major Avenue. This culvert upgrade is going to help us meet capacities for the 100-year storm, and it is currently budgeted to cost the city $100,000. Questions?
Your Honor,
Go ahead.
what size of culvert is that?
In order to meet the 100-year plan, it needs to be at least a 7-foot size. When we are doing our preliminary reconnaissance on this project, there's not enough room to be install a circular pipe. So we're going to install what we call a squash pipe, which is an elliptical pipe, which is similar to the capacity, but it is oval in design. So it's going to have a 7-foot capacity diameter.
Oh, it's 7 foot from edge to edge,
Yeah,
side ID.
yeah, it'll match that, but now since we can't do a full circular pipe, do that squash pipe and get by and make it work.
What's the maximum flow through that pipe?
Your Honor, I don't have that information before me. I could get that for you.
But it's estimated that it would handle this, the 100-year.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Owner,
Go ahead.
I have one question. Is this job going to be bid out, or are we going to do that in-house?
Your Honor, that job is going to be bid out. With the size of that pipe, the city really doesn't have the technical expertise or the real equipment to be able to install that. Our hope is to actually partner with the school district. As we bid it out, we invite the school district's contractor to bid on that, and hopefully they can schedule it as part of their work, and there'll be an economy of scale there since they're already mobilized to the site.
So with any luck, hopefully we can come under the 100,000.
Let's cross our fingers. Thank you.
The only other question, so is there other, I guess, utilities or anything that need to be addressed as part of that improvement for the South Major?
Your Honor, that is correct, and we've planned for that with a sewer improvement, and Ms. Wilhelm will cover that.
Okay.
There will be an extension as part of that roadway improvement.
Thank you.
The next item is the North Federal Boulevard improvements. As you know, in 2017, WYDOT is planning on reconstructing North Federal Boulevard, and we're very excited for this project. It's definitely needed and will provide a great amenity to our city. As part of that and in preparation, the city is budgeting $50,000 to design our street light network for electrical and also design our stormwater plans for that project. We currently are working with HDR engineers. We had an existing contract with them to design utilities, and this is going to be part of that. So $50,000 out of general fund to design our electrical for street lights and also the stormwater. The next project on your list is the Trimble survey equipment. This is actually something that will benefit both the Public Works Department and the Community Development Department. The city's existing survey equipment is out of date and lacks precision. We can't actually get a good read on the vertical distance when it's taking surveys. Therefore, $15,000 has been budgeted to replace the existing equipment, and we hope that this will enable us to upgrade in our technological abilities and also use Miss Wilhelm, who is our engineer on staff, and she will help us design some of the more basic projects and hopefully save some money by doing some in-house design on that. Since this is going to be a piece of equipment that will benefit services to the general fund and also the enterprise funds, water and sewer, that $15,000 total cost for the Trimble piece of equipment is going to be shared, and $7,500 has been budgeted out of the general fund to purchase that piece of equipment. Our next project is the Riverview Road improvements. As you are aware, the Riverview Road was constructed during this fiscal year for the most part. It is a project that was supported by an Urban Systems Project grant. WYDOT administered that project. We have budgeted $190,000 this upcoming fiscal year that will aid to the completion of this project. There are a few outstanding items, the largest of which to complete this project is a chip seal that will go over top the new pavement that has been placed. Again, this is a great project. I think the city has received a lot of benefit from it, and we're looking forward to it getting completed this upcoming year. Our next project is also one that was worked on during this current fiscal year, in fact last summer. That is our South Federal improvement. YDOT is finalizing construction on South Federal Boulevard from Monroe to Washington. $5,000 has been budgeted from the general fund to cover project closeout and administrative costs. As part of our agreement with YDOT, we share 8% of the closeout and administrative costs for these YDOT sponsored projects, and this $5,000 will help us finish this out. Thank you, Your Honor and Council. That concludes the projects for the general fund, and I will now turn the time to Ms. Wilhelm, who will cover our utility, water, and wastewater projects.
Thank you.
Good evening, Your Honor and Council. Like Mr. Butterfield said, I'm going to cover the water and sewer fund projects. There are several on each fund that kind of go along with what was talked about in the general fund. The first of these is the North Federal Improvements Project. Like Mr. Butterfield said, that's going to be scheduled at this point to be reconstructed in 2017. The city has entered into what's called an ARS agreement with YDOT to reconstruct, as they're reconstructing those streets, for us to do our water and sewer lines. We have contracted with HDR to design those, so we've included in both the water and sewer fund $40,000 in each fund to help with that design, because the design costs are on the city for that project. The next under the water fund is the Trimble survey equipment. Out of the enterprise funds, it's budgeted for $3,750 to come out of both the water and the sewer fund for that equipment. That will be a great asset to this city. The next one under the water fund is the MCC replacements at the water treatment plant. My understanding when you guys did the tour up there, Ms. Hoffman, who's our chief operator up there, kind of showed you what the MCC, and that's the master control consoles, where all the power goes through. Right now, it's in order to change out a blown circuit or something, it's a high-powered, high voltage, I should say, work that they have to do, and it's quite dangerous because there's risk of it's live work and there's risk of shock. So in order to get those upgraded, because they are 30 years old, we have budgeted $85,000 to replace that equipment.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Is that something that is going to be done in a phase, or is that something that where the water treatment plant goes down for a length of time to get it done?
Your Honor, that will be done after operating hours. That equipment's not used when the plant's not operating, so it's going to be one fell swoop, but it will not happen until after the operating season, which is in October. Any other questions on that? Okay, the next project under the water fund is the South Federal water improvements. Again, we've budgeted $5,000 to help with the administrative and project closeout of that project on the water side. Basically, all the water's in, we paid for it, but YDOT has to still verify a few things, and so in order to keep some money, we've budgeted $5,000 in for that fund.
Go ahead, Lee.
I have one question.
Yes.
I know we went through the South Federal improvement above, and then we're going through it again. Is that the same, it's only $5,000, not $10,000?
Your Honor, at this point, it would be $10,000. It's $5,000 out of the general fund
So it's
and
two different-
$5,000 out of this water fund.
Okay. Thank you.
So it's 10,000, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
So it's total of 10,000.
At this
But
point,
we
Your
split it, 5 from each area, 5 general, 5 water.
And sewer.
And then there'll be 5 more.
Yeah. Your Honor, at this point, it's a total of 10. Then when we get to the sewer fund, like they've said, there's another 5,000 there.
It'll be 15 total.
Oh, okay.
At this point, Your Honor, we have two contracts with YDOT. One is for the administrative of the road the road reconstruction, and that's what Mr. Butterfield was talking about, where we share in the administrative cost of 8%. The ARS agreements, well, actually on South Federal we have 3. The ARS agreements, that is our water and our sewer fund. The city of Riverton is 100%, has to pay 100% of all those costs. YDOT administers that contract for us with the contractor, but we are responsible for 100% of all those costs. And they haven't quite, they were just doing some final work on it, they just painted it. And there's a few things that, procedure-wise, internally in YDOT, that they do double checks to make sure all the quantities are correct and all that stuff, and that lags up to a year behind the project closeout. So we just wanted to make sure that we had enough money in that project to help cover those costs. Okay. The next one, again, is a YDOT, the Riverview Road. Again, we have an agreement for the utilities for 100%. So we've budgeted $5,000 to help with that project closeout as well. The next one is the Riverton Water Supply Project. And this is a continuation. It's been 7 years. We are on the final phase. It's phase 3, which will loop the water line from the new water tank on Airport Road back to the west behind the Rain Tree Estates and stuff, and then it'll bring it down Rain Tree and Mountain View and loop it into the water line that is on Riverview. There's several benefits to this right now. If there's a water break anywhere between Hill Street and Augusta, we basically, everybody west of that is out of water. Because it's looped within subdivisions, like in the golf course, the country club edition, it's looped in those streets, but it's a single feed really on Riverview. And so this will help us loop so we don't have that problem. Hopefully we don't have any more breaks because we just replaced that line, but it will help serve us. Also on Rain Tree, we've reached basically the upper limit of our water extension because of pressures. Pressures are really low, so if anybody builds within the city, we cannot really supply them with water because our pressures are too low to adequately serve that house. So this will help that, and it's the same grant loan that we have with the Wyoming Water Development Commission. So it's a 77% grant loan. 67. Yeah, sorry. 67% loan, 10% grant, and 23 city costs. And we budgeted, because it's going to be a multi-phase or multi-year construction, we budgeted $900,000 for that. We got an extension on our grant of over almost $3 million. So total for that is $12.6 million. So any questions, sir?
As far as the right-of-ways for that line, do you have any feel for when, if, how that's done?
Your Honor, at this point, we are in talks with the tribe, with the Northern Arapaho tribe. That is the majority of the easements that we have to get for that. They've indicated that they're willing to work with us on getting that, and it's about 1,000 lineal foot of easement that we would get from them. But it's basically we've been speaking with them for like the last 6 months, trying to get that work through, and hopefully we'll get it. Like I said, they've indicated that they're fine with the project and that they're willing to work with us. It's just slow moving through all their paperwork and
Projects,
stuff.
it's already designed to go through that right of way.
Your Honor, at this time, the project we just received at the end of last month, we received the 90% design on that. So technically, yes, at this point it is designed. There really is no way around tribal ground to bring service to that area.
Your Honor,
Go ahead.
just another point on that. There is an incentive from the Northern Arapahoes because they have a plotted piece of ground that they plan to put a subdivision of houses in, and they're hoping to get city water off of that. So there is some incentive. So I think it's moving in the right direction. It's just pretty slow.
That was my question. Is there any possibility of serving the landowners of that area with our services? And you think that's the key?
Yes, Your Honor, because typically how the city's dealt with not necessarily money exchange for easements,
Oh, no.
typically been water taps.
It's service.
That's right. And so that's what they're interested in. So I think, yes, we would be wanting to serve that area, and that's going to help us in trying to get these easements.
Cool.
Your Honor. Martinez.
In that case, if this does come to fruition and we agree on it, then according to code, if they tap onto the water, they have to be annexed to the city?
Your Honor, the way it states in the code, that's generally speaking what it is, but the council can do otherwise. We did the same thing with the Mountain View Water District agreement that we signed about 1.5 years ago when this comes through, to allow them to have emergency water and not be annexed to the city. And so it's up to the council. The council can waive that if they want to.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
Mr. Larson?
So we will have that opportunity once that comes through to make that point. I mean, I don't think that we need to expand the size of Riverton for revenues or anything else, but services we can certainly supply for enterprise funds. Thank you.
Okay. And the last project under the water fund is miscellaneous water improvements. We are aware, well, one project is going to bid out tomorrow is the fire hydrant replacement project. We've got 16 fire hydrants that we will be putting out for bid. We hope to get the majority of that work done at the end of this fiscal year, but because of legislative requirements on advertising for the final payment, it's a 40-day lead time. Our retainage payment will not hit in this budget in this fiscal year, so we've budgeted $50,000 for that retainage. The rest of that $100,000 is, we are also aware of a development on the city subdivision, which is the old hospital lot, that they are going to be putting in some houses. And when they were discussing with the city of Riverton, we required them to loop the water line. It just is much better service if you have a looped water line. It helps with service, so if there's a break, you can feed from either end. Plus, it also helps with head loss and pressures. You get higher pressures if you've looped the water line. So we asked them, and this was over 1 year ago, we asked them to loop that, and unfortunately, they are just now getting ready to construct that. So because we asked them to loop that, we agreed when they purchased that property that the city would pay for that. So we've also budgeted money for that little small portion of water line in that area.
Your Honor.
Go ahead, Mr. Larson.
On the fire hydrant replacement or repair, is that a excavation in the area, or are we just gonna gut them and replace parts? Or does it, or it's individual?
Your Honor, we've asked that they replace all the way to the main, the valve, because it just depends on what is wrong with them. There's quite a few of those that are old hydrants that there are no longer parts available because they're 30 years old and that manufacturer is no longer in business. So a lot of those hydrants you can't get parts for. So basically, to get them up to standard, plus there's also some that have ductile iron lines and old corrosive lines. The valves aren't working, so that project is basically going back to the main, and it will replace the hydrant lead, the valve, hydrant valve, and the hydrant itself.
Thank you.
Any other questions on those two? Okay. Moving on to the sewer fund. We've got the first one is the Cliffview Lift Station upgrades. This one is one of the lift stations that the city is responsible for, and we've had quite a few problems of materials that are being flushed that do not go through the grinder pumps. And at this point right now, the collection and distribution crews are pumping that lift station out weekly. So in order to kind of alleviate that maintenance item for them, we've budgeted $75,000 to replace those grinder pumps with more of a trash pump, which will handle the larger, it's basically those flushable wipes for some reason are binding up the grinder pumps, and it's just not handling them, and it's kicking off the pump, so then the lift station fills and doesn't pump. So it's to replace those grinder pumps. Plus there's the concrete of the lift station itself is kind of degrading, so it'll be to upgrade that as well.
Those handy wipes, they are a problem nationwide. California is right now wanting to ban all of that stuff because it's given their sewers fits every town.
Yep.
I don't know what to do about those.
Where is this located?
The Cliffview lift station is actually Cliffview Mobile Home Parks. It's kind of near where the
Park
pond
and
is gonna
Smith?
go. Yeah. Okay, the next one under the sewer is the North Federal improvements. And like we've talked about, we budgeted $40,000 for the utility design for that, so that it can be constructed in hopefully 2017. The next one would be the share of the Trimble survey equipment at $3,750. With Willow Creek, the next one is the Willow Creek offsite improvements. Like Mr. Butterfield said, we would like to extend the sanitary sewer, which basically ends in Monroe. We want to extend it up Major for a length to serve the subdivisions that are platted on either side of that. So the city's budgeted, it's about 800 feet of line for that, so we've budgeted $75,000 for that construction. Then the next two projects are the YDOT projects that are currently closing out. It's the South Federal and the Riverview Road. And for each of those, we've budgeted $5,000 in the utility, in the sewer fund. Okay, and the last one in the sewer fund is miscellaneous sewer improvements. We've budgeted $150,000 for that. And there's just, the wastewater infrastructure is just as old as the water lines, and there are areas that we know are aged. The construction materials used for construction are outdated, they've collapsed, or there's a bunch of root infiltration. We know of one area where there's kind of an offset in it, and we've budgeted $150,000 to help take care of those problem areas, start taking care of those. Is there any questions? Thank you.
Good.
Turn it back over to Mr. Butterfield.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honor, and thank you, Ms. Wilhelm. As you can tell, we're blessed to have her with our city. She's very skilled and is an asset for us. As we move forward, let's talk about the sanitation fund. The sanitation fund currently only has a fleet capital purchase, which is going to be centered on a new garbage truck. $280,000 has been budgeted for this purchase. Our current fleet is aging, and we are due for a new garbage truck. Are there any questions regarding that purchase?
Your Honor,
Go ahead.
is that gonna be for alleys, or is that gonna be for streets?
Your Honor, that is a great question. Our original intent was to purchase a rollout specific garbage truck. However, when I've been working with my staff, we're finding that we still have a need for the alley dumpster type trucks. And the reason for that is to provide service to our commercial accounts and then also our yard waste accounts that are still on those dumpsters. Right now, we call them impact trucks. That's the best way to refer to them. So the impact trucks are the oldest in our fleet and the most costly to maintain. The Heil trucks, which are the rollout specific trucks, are relatively newer. As you remember, we purchased 2 of them in the last 3 years. And so our original intent was to provide a backup truck that can run our yard waste program, which are the rollouts, and basically support the 2 trucks we currently have. The reason being, we're going to be running those 2 rollout trucks quite more often now. It's due to the change that happened. We have more rollouts, they're running more frequently, and we are expecting more maintenance and breakdowns. That being said, as I mentioned earlier, the impact trucks are aging more rapidly and the breakdowns are more significant. So from a cost benefit perspective, we may propose that we purchase the impact truck. At this time, we'd like to analyze our situation for about 6 months and then come to the council and propose which truck would work best. And that will also give us time to analyze how our new system is working, how our revenues are coming in from the fees, and how stable our sanitation fund is.
Mr. Larson.
Follow-up. Is there a possibility that that somewhere there is a combination of both?
Your Honor, at this time, the impact trucks are able to collect rollouts and alley dumpsters. The issue we had with those, if you remember, is the compactor on that truck is not as efficient, and the size and capacity is not as good as the Heil trucks. So when we were looking to gain time, the impact trucks were not the best option for
I
us.
understand that, but I mean, we're looking at buying a new one. My question is there a combination that would be able to use both and compact also?
I think
Or
that's
are we still studying that?
I think that's a great question that we can look into over the next 6 months. We understand that this purchase is rather hefty. $280,000. When we spend that money out of an enterprise fund, we want to make sure we spend it responsibly. And so as we look to replacing a truck, providing a truck, we want to make sure it's the right one. So we can definitely look into that. And as a side note, we do have a fleet of those impact trucks, and I believe we will be able to sell at least one of those and supplement our revenues towards the purchase of. Great. Let's move on to the airport fund. As we work through the projects for the airport fund, many of you will be familiar with them. The first of which is our design portion of the runway reconstruction project that just got started this last week. The reason why we have budgeted monies for this upcoming fiscal year for the design portion is there's still some outstanding work related to the design. This has to do with the GIS portion of our design. We wanted to wait until obviously the construction was completed, and then we could go out and survey and upload our GIS information, which YDOT Aeronautics requires of us as an airport. So $100,000 has been budgeted for this upcoming fiscal year. This will be supported by federal grant, state grant, and local funds. If there are no more questions, moving on to the next item.
Go ahead, Mr. Larson.
Is that required? You say that's required to do that after we're complete with the runway?
Your Honor, that is correct, and the reason being is, as part of the GIS, you want to have accurate elevations, and so we'd hate to complete that GIS report and then have to do it again because the elevations had changed once the project was completed.
So we're doing that or contracting it?
That is going to be part of the current contract we have with Javiation, who have designed that project.
So that'll be certified then?
Correct.
Mr. Fabian?
What is the PFC funds?
PFC stands for Passenger Facility Charge. Those are fees that are paid by users of our airport.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, the next item is the environmental assessment of runway 1028. This again ties into the project, the runway reconstruction project. This is required by federal and state mandates. And this is again something that has been, for the most part, completed. 85% of this assessment has been completed. However, we are reserving $5,000 to complete this. And the reason being is because we cannot complete this environmental assessment until the runway reconstruction project is complete, and if there's a potential for having new or upgraded or different aircraft flying in and out of our airport, the environmental assessment will cover the sound that it will make on the impact of sound that they will have on our city. So we've reserved $5,000 to finish that study once the project is complete. And again, this is supported by federal, state, and local funds.
Go ahead.
Is on this environmental, and is this just sound?
No, it covers a wide array. In fact, they go through endangered species, they go through vegetation, sight lines, et cetera, et cetera. And
What about the runoff from the runway?
correct, runoff would be included in that as well. So anything that would affect the environment surrounding our airport has to be analyzed and controlled for when we do a project of this nature. The only thing that has not been controlled for is that sound impact, and we're holding back just on the expectation that we will have supplemental and improved air service next year.
Last question. Don't we have easements for that sound? In other words, if you're building a house behind the runway, there's an easement on that land stating that you're next to an airport.
Correct.
Would
That's,
expect that you would have sounds from that airport.
Your Honor, that is correct. That's covered in the zoning that's attached to the airport as well. So obviously, we've been operating a runway and an airport for a lot of years out of the city of Riverton. This is just going to analyze the change that might occur if larger jets or aircraft are coming out of our airport. This is again something that is mandated from the federal government. Fortunately, they help pay for it too.
Didn't we have large jets in there in the 80s?
Your Honor, that is correct, but we have to update it to this day.
So, what has changed? We don't know yet until we do the assessment.
I would risk being a little bit lippy and say the FAA has changed.
Okay.
The FAA has moved the goalpost.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Your Honor. The next one on your list is the current reconstruction of runway 10. That's listed as AIP 39 and 40. Those reference the grants that we receive to do those projects. It basically centers on reconstructing the runway and also the localizers that are attached to runway 10. We received great bids on this project. It is supported by federal, state, and local funding, and currently have budgeted $12,955,150 for this project.
I do have a question about that. How does that cash flow? Do we get that grant money up front or part of it, or how do we, I mean, obviously $12 million exceeds our combined cash on hand.
Your Honor, we have worked with the FAA and also with the assistance of Javiation, and we have confirmation that we can request drawdowns from the grant when we receive pay applications for the contractor. So therefore, if we receive $1 million pay application from a contractor, which is very likely on a project of this size, prior to paying that, we can draw down our grant request and pay that portion from the federal funds. So that's a long way of saying the city does not have to float the entire pay application before getting reimbursed from the federal and state government.
Thank you.
Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Do we have any inspection on that, or any federal agency that has to come in and say, here's my signature, now you can get the money? Other words, like a construction loan in completion?
Your Honor, that is correct. As part of the grant agreements, the FAA signs off on the scope of work. They sign off on who the city hires to do the project management, to do the inspections, and the final payout. So it's all part of the grant assurances, which have been approved. We submitted a scope of work to the FAA. They have approved that. They accept our consultant, who is Javiation, and also their sub-consultant.
I'm just trying to find that we're not gonna get hung out to dry with the money unavailable.
It is a large project involving a lot of money, and that is a concern. I know we as administrators with the city, Stephen, Courtney, have been concerned about, and we feel fortunate that the FAA is working with us on allowing us to draw down those monies, and we're confident this project will go smoothly, done in a timely fashion. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Moving forward, the next project is expanding our ARF building. ARF stands for Air Rescue and Fire. That is for our airport. And again, if we operate as a commercial airport, we have to provide those emergency services. This building design will help us accommodate a new ARF truck, rescue truck, which has been mandated and required by the FAA. This design project will help prepare us when we purchase this new fire truck, and also prepare us when we have to have a place to house it. $50,000 has been budgeted for this design, and again, it is supported by federal, state, and local funding. There are no questions. Moving on to the next item is that ARF equipment. Again, that's Air Rescue and Fire. And this is a design portion for us to be able to purchase a new air, fire, and rescue truck. It is regulated that this has to be designed. We are required, again, as a commercial airport, to replace these pieces of equipment on a certain time frame. We're due for this replacement, and therefore $50,000 has been budgeted for the design of this truck. And this is going to be supported by federal, state, and local monies.
This is just the design.
Honor, that is correct. That is just
So now we have to engineer a truck.
this is what we call the foot in the door approach. We design it first for a certain amount, and then we have to ask for council approval for the actual purchase.
Go ahead, Lee.
Just so I can get this clear in my head, this $50,000, it says here that 93.75% of the project is from FAA. Now, is that, the 50,000 is our part of that?
No, Your Honor, that is the total cost.
Okay, so
We will
we
pay
would only have
2.5.
to pay 2.5% from the city.
Your Honor, Councilman, that is correct.
You go to the very back page that it lays out where each.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
When you say design the truck, doesn't it already exist?
Yes.
Your Honor, it does exist. In fact, we have one currently parked in the existing ARF building.
But I mean, the newer one is different dimensional.
The newer one falls under newer FAA regulations. They are larger and wider, and therefore do not fit in our existing ARF building. And the building has to be modified to accommodate the newly required ARF rescue truck. And this has been part of our capital plan for a number of years. We knew it was coming up. And again, fortunately, the FAA at least helps pay for the regulations they push down on us.
What happens to our old, smaller, less efficient truck? Sell that, or it does, or it's backup?
Backup.
Your Honor, that is correct. It will serve as a backup for a number of years, and after it reaches its mandated lifespan, it can be sold or repurposed for another use within the city of Riverton.
We're out.
Yeah, it's probably got 30 miles on it, right?
Training exercises, and we're happy it only has that much.
Okay.
Yeah, 35.
Moving to the next item, this is the TSA secure area. In order to accommodate larger commercial aircraft, Riverton Regional Airport must enlarge its existing secure area. This is the secure area that came about from TSA and some of those regulations that came after 9/11. $35,000 has been budgeted to temporarily combine the existing secure area with the adjacent observation room. We understand at this time that we're searching for supplemental air service. We want to improve, we want to increase our emplanements. But until that is defined and set in stone, staff feels that the best use of public funds is to temporarily accommodate this increase of passenger traffic. If this passenger traffic sustains, we'd like to look at receiving grants and loans to enlarge and improve our terminal in general and do something more long-term. So this is currently to temporarily accommodate those increased passengers.
Does that also include the deplaning? Will they have to come through the secure area, or will that be brought into?
Your Honor, current layout, those that are deplaning do not have to go through the secure area. However, we have to control their exit point, and we've plotted that out. And so
that exit point currently is what we're going to include as the secure point.
Correct. We're going to shift the walls and remain a little bit of space, so it will serve as a hallway of sorts, so that those deplaning can exit the airfield and get into the terminal without entering that secure area.
Okay.
Thank you. And the last line item here cover 2 fleet purchases for the airport. These have been part of the capital improvement plan that we work through with YDOT Aeronautics. The first of which is an operations truck for the total amount of $35,000. This is supported by a 50-50 grant from YDOT Aeronautics. Therefore, a little over $17,000 will be used out of city and enterprise funds, and the others will be supported by YDOT. The next is a airport operations mower, which we will also be able to use to clear snow around the terminal. This again will be supported by state and local funds. The federal will not be supporting this one. However, the purchase of this piece of equipment will be at a 90-10 match. Therefore, the city of Riverton will only have to participate in $6,500 of this.
Your Honor?
Go ahead.
So the existing mower that's up there, can it be moved like to parks or anything, or?
We are able to move pieces of equipment from enterprise fund to general fund if we purchase it for a certain amount. So, for example, if we had a mower at the airport or at the treatment plants that we wanted the parks department to use, we could sell it from the enterprise fund for $1, $20, $200 to the general fund and use it for general fund purposes. The reason for that is there are rules that regulate the enterprise fund, and that, as you are well aware.
Is the mower still useful? Is it dead? Is it?
This is currently to supplement what we have up there.
Oh, so you need both. Okay.
Go ahead.
Sir, we've talked about this before, and I'm going to be honest with you. The last 4 items are again items that I have heartburn with, strictly because these are the things that we're betting that we continue with a better commercial air service up there. You know, it's like enlarging the terminal for a 50-passenger jet, hoping that we get a 50-passenger jet. You know, by building a bigger building for the fire truck, hoping, you know, that again, we have commercial service up there that requires the new fire truck, that quote requires the new building. So, you know, I'll ask you the same type of questions I've asked before, you know, are these types of things that we can quote push to the back burner until we find out whether we are going to have a good commercial airline service up there?
Your Honor, specifically with improving that TSA area, the answer to that is definitely yes. We wouldn't move any of those walls or do any of that project until we had a better understanding that supplemental air service was coming to the city of Riverton and Riverton Regional. At the other side of things, it gets a little bit more complicated. Since we partner with YDOT Aeronautics and a lot of times the FAA for these purchases, they also have to work through their budget processes. And therefore, we work through a capital plan that really projects 10 years into the future which projects and which purchases will be made so that everyone budgets the right amount at the right time. And the window where we can pull things from this capital plan is usually 2 years before that actual purchase or project occurs. And again, the reason for that is YDOT is still, they're going through their budgets. And if they commit budgetary funds to this purchase and then we don't and back out, it does not work well with our relationship with them.
I'm not talking about not committing the funds or not budgeting them. I'm concerned about spending them.
Okay.
You know, putting that $5,000, $10,000 in the budget as a placeholder doesn't bother me. What bothers me is to go out and quote, start building a new building for the larger fire truck, and then come January, we no longer have viable commercial air service coming in here, and we've got a huge, nice new fire truck and a nice new building up there that is gonna, quote, we're gonna throw a padlock on and collect dust. So those are my questions. Are those types of things you can sit there and say, yeah, I can put that as a placeholder in the budget, but oh, by the way, we're gonna wait until we get a good commercial service up there before we start writing checks.
Your Honor, I appreciate that feedback. My personal opinion is we're going to work through this reconstruction project that's going to take us into this upcoming winter. Once that project is complete, I feel we'll have a better view and a better perspective on what type of air service we'll be able to entice to the city of Riverton. We're committed to providing good air service to our community, and I believe that our community will support that air service once we make some improvements. We know we need to make these improvements. So I think there is a possibility to budget for these funds and then assess them halfway through the year and see, okay, are we even a commercial airport at this time? Which I'm going to go out there and say we will be. We're committed to it, provide that commercial service to our residents, and we want to improve, and I think we're going to take the necessary steps to do so. But I think mid-fiscal year would be a great time to analyze whether we go forward with some of these projects or fall back. And I think another aspect that adds a bit of complexity to this decision and also these budgeted funds, the federal match and the Wyoming Aeronautics match are dependent upon our enplanements. As you are aware, last year we struggled with our enplanements, and this year we project to struggle with our enplanements based off the current activity that we've received and then also because of the project. So if our enplanements do not receive an exemption from the FAA for those enplanements, those purchases will not happen because the city of Riverton nor the enterprise funds do not have enough money to purchase or provide those projects outright to require those matches. So again, as we take time, I think mid-year we'll have a really good idea of where we stand and can pull the trigger one way or the other.
Thank you.
Your Honor, that rounds me out. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Weaver, are we done with capital now? Okay, I'm going to call a recess. I'll call us back to order. Mr. Weaver.
Yes, Your Honor, and members of the council. So we can now start into the meat and potatoes of the budget. As you can see, the city of Riverton has a total budget, including capital, of $32,759,792. That's up about $3 million from last year. But as we discussed in our previous one, the airport is the reason for that, since we have a project of about $13 million. So if we didn't have that project, we'd actually be down in our capital from the previous year. We do have a balanced budget. In the budget, the two major types of funds are the general fund and the enterprise funds. General fund is the primary operating fund of the city and is used to account for the revenues and expenditures of most tax-supported activities of the city, such as the police department, the largest department in the general fund. Enterprise funds are much like business-like funds because they should run like a business. Fees are charged to external users to cover services provided. That would be, the example would be the water, the wastewater, and the sanitation. I'd like to thank the department heads, the division managers, and many other staff for their hard work in preparing the budget. There's several months that goes into preparing this, a lot of time and energy, and sometimes fun interactions, Okay. The city of Riverton has held its own in the last several years. We have not had to cut position or decrease services in the past couple of years. Our success is our lean staff and good budget projections. We also monitor the revenue expenditures constantly to make sure we are on the right track. We will maintain our financial reserves in fiscal year 2016 at 18.5% per council policy. Revenues in all funds exceed expenses except in the airport. The airport is subsidized by the general fund. Out of the 31 divisions, 8 divisions were at 99% or less than the previous budget. 7 indicated slight increases and 13 increased more than 5%. In each fund, department, or division, you will find a summary page that is part of your document that goes through and describes a description, a mission, revenue assumptions, and expenditure highlights. And so I believe most of you have probably already read that and seen those. The point we do this in is hoping that anybody that picks up this budget would be able to read it and try to understand what each department's doing, what we're trying to accomplish, and the expenditures that we are increasing from the previous year. A new division called customer service you will find in the enterprise funds. No additional monies are increased, but extracted from the general administration in the enterprise funds. Let's see. The final one is related to the airport. Staff will be asking the council to, in the next meeting, to make a motion to assign $200,000 of the city's general fund reserves towards the airport revenue guarantee. We've talked about this over the course of the year. This is based on the city getting a new airline and that the revenue guarantee is $2.1 million. We don't know exactly what guarantee is going to be. Most of them have been 2.1, so that's what we're counting on. 1.5 million will come from the state, and then the remaining 600,000 has been talked about with the committee to come from Fresno County, yeah. Fremont County. Fremont County, the city of Lander, and the city of Riverton. And so it's a three-way split. And so we're doing our part. I actually just sent an email today asking the other two entities if they were doing the same. I haven't received a response yet. But this is contingent, obviously, upon this being a joint effort from everybody.
No one else, Your Honor? You said just Lander and Riverton?
Yes, Your Honor.
So we're excluding Du Bois and Shoshone and anybody else that doesn't have a Lander or Riverton. They're not required, or we're not asking for donations, or we're too prideful to ask them for money?
Your Honor, in the early meetings when we talked about this, we had all those cities there, and they talked about if we could do it, it would be $500 here and there, because most of these cities just don't have budgets to accomplish that at all. And so the idea was, it was the three major contributors would be the county, Lander, and Riverton, but I don't think we're excluding anybody. The point of the FAST committee was to try to get out and try to raise money from businesses, individuals, anybody that participates and uses the Riverton airport.
Have we talked to both of the tribes to help?
We have, as a part of the meetings, that was one of the discussions at the time that we even talked to the casino general manager, and at the time they weren't willing to give anything at the time. But it's like I said, I think it's worth a shot. We just need to at least set some money aside so that if this comes forward, that we're able to make that happen if it happens. But if it happens to be that we raise other funds from other businesses, then we can lower that amount.
Yeah, it just seems to me that what we're doing here is earmarking this reserve for that particular purpose. If this doesn't come about, then the money goes back to general reserve funds. But it's a positive thing. You know, the city says we're going to earmark. We're setting our 200,000 up, and then that gives other people a target, and so that's helpful. And then if it looks like, you know, that money's coming together, then that makes an airline a little bit more amenable maybe to come here. But it's a process, and then if it doesn't work, then we're not out anything.
The other item I'd like to bring up that's just related to that, and since we had put out our budget in our discussion with the Finance Committee when we presented this to the Finance Committee, was the issue of North Federal Storm Sewer. We know that's coming up in 2017. We know the price tag is upwards of $2 to $3 million, and so it's fairly substantial. And so one of the ideas was to do something similar out of our reserves and assign a portion of money towards that so that we can start preparing for that. And in discussion with Courtney, we felt like a good number is somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000. We feel comfortable that we could assign towards the North Federal Storm Sewer that would get it set aside, and then next year we're going to have to do more. But I just brought that up to you to see what you think about that. We don't have to make a decision now because we're thinking about bringing that resolution to you next Tuesday. At that point, you'd have to make the decision. But are you fairly supportive of that or not?
Mr. Larson.
Do we have a clue of how much water we've got running down there right now? Down Redwood, down Prison Farm Road. Do we have a clue of what the last 3 weeks we had moisture? Do we know what went down there? Do we have any idea what's going down there on the historical data?
Your Honor, I don't know those figures, especially in relationship to the recent storm, and especially with WIDOT operating that system, but I can answer and say that at least the detention pond, which will cover that 100-year storm, is required to be 33 acre feet. What that tells us as far as what's running down the pipes, not much. I don't have that information to help with that question.
I tell you, it's more than what you're thinking right now. We've got a substantial amount of water running into the river on those two drainages. Substantial. I'd like to have the real estate having that run through my backyard. It'd be good.
Any other comments related to that?
So explain to me again, you're thinking about setting aside $300,000 as a construction reserve account for this project?
Yeah, out of our cash on hand.
Okay.
Your Honor.
Go ahead.
So, my thought when we were talking about it in finance was that in order to get grant monies, we've got to have some matching funds as the city. And if we're looking at a project of that size and scope, then those matching funds are going to be substantial. And so I just thought if we can start now and earmark money toward it, then perhaps if we can get, $1 million or something over the course of the next few years earmarked to that, then we've met our match for any grants we might be eligible for.
We know we know that from what we've had, we won't have enough, even if we plan on saving as much.
So I'm taking that as yes.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Okay, great.
You certainly have my support.
Okay.
Go ahead.
On the, I'll make my comment about the airport. If next week when you give us that information, do a little digging and find out whether a 2.1 million subsidy is even in the running. We talked about some of the cities in Nebraska losing their airline, even though they were offering a subsidy. We've already gone out and talked to an airline and told them 2.1, and they've kind of said, thanks, we'll put you on the waiting list at that amount. I guess I would like to get a feel as to whether 2.1 is that going to be in the running, or are we wasting our time even talking about that amount?
Your Honor, we can look into that, particularly in Sheridan, because I know they've secured additional air service, so we could find out what their revenue guarantee, and that's something that just happened in the last couple months. But we can talk to YDOT and maybe some other states to see it's hard to say, because if there's a list a mile long of people that are willing to pay the 2.1, then they're probably going to jack that up and say, well, who's willing to do it for 3.1, and we'll go to those communities. So it's kind of a bidding war. General fund revenues are estimated to be $8,331,505. We're estimating slight increases in property tax, use tax, supplemental funding, special fuel tax, which is diesel, reimbursements on school resource officers and the DCI officer. We're also estimating a decrease in sales tax and court fines. The supplemental funding is a little confusing, because that's given to us in a biennium, which is 2 years. So compared to last year, we're going to get an additional $104,172. So that was a good thing that WHAM helped us with in securing some more funds from the legislature. Sales and use tax are the largest source of revenue for the general fund. They account for 32% of revenue in the general fund. This year we've been running about 10% behind in sales tax than what we had projected to receive. Use tax has been a little bit more than we expected. Grants account for 43% of the entire budget for the city. Staff oversees 28 grants. In fiscal year 2015, staff was instrumental in obtaining $14,134,338 in grant funds for municipal projects. Grant management is a significant effort in making sure we comply with the conditions of the grant. And Gloria, which is here, she does a fine job, and as our finance director in tracking those. We haven't had any audit findings in the last couple years. $16,134,150 is projected to be spent toward capital projects, as we've talked about, next year, with an additional $2.1 million in 1% funds. Of that, 84.5% of the funds needed to complete these projects will come from granting agencies. General fund expenditures. We have 14 departments or divisions. Mayor and council, city administrator, municipal court, administrative services, IT, facilities maintenance, police, fire, public services, streets and alleys, fleet maintenance, weed and pest, parks, and community development. Expenditures are fairly flat compared to last year, even though we see some increases and decreases in each department. And as I discussed before, in front of each division, there's a little summary of what's going on and expenditure highlights. So I'm just going to hit on a few of those major expenditures from each department. We'll start in the mayor and council. We're continuing to keep with the legal services at the same level we had last year. We bumped that up to deal with the EPA decision at the 10th Circuit Court. The good news is we were reimbursed for approximately 75% by the state of Wyoming. There is created an account known as the Federal Natural Resource Policy Account. Funds within the account may be expended by the governor on behalf of the state of Wyoming and its local governments to take any of the actions specified in the subsection in response to federal land, water, air, mineral, and other natural resource policies which may affect the tax base of the state, wildlife management, state species, recreation, private properties, water rights, or leaseholder rights. And so we expect that we're going to be able to apply for that same account in the next year as we continue to pay our attorney and to fight this down in Denver. We've also increased the travel and training in the council line item due to we seem to have more active members of the council than we have in the past and in participating in WAM and training events. We've also added a council contingency line item to address anything that comes up during the year that the council would like to put money towards. And then we've got a new line item, which is called the beautification kiosk, to address the council goal of 2 beautification projects and centralize information for recreational opportunities. In the IT, we had some increases to travel and training and website upgrades. The police department had increase in computer supplies for upgrades required to maintain the in-car computer and cameras. Vehicle and equipment maintenance was increased to cover the cages and light bars for new vehicles. In the past, sometimes we put that under capital, but for fixed assets purposes, it's easier to separate those and have that in the line item in the budget in the capital just for the car itself. Increases in educational assistance. Many officers are interested in furthering their education in college classes. Public Works Department shows a significant decrease because changes from where both the Public Works Director and Public Works Secretary are compensated. 50% is out of the cost center, and the rest is distributed across different cost centers in the enterprise funds. And sometimes we just go through and we're trying to show exactly what people are working in and trying to distribute those. And so sometimes you'll see changes that we do year in year to make it a true reflection of where they're actually working. Streets and alleys reflects an increase due to addition of 2 seasonal laborers. We need more personnel to be able to accomplish more and more on our streets. It also reflects how the lands division manager and lands division foremans are compensated between streets and alleys and sanitation. A new line item was added called crack seal, and a portion was taken from the road material line item. The purpose is to separate those to find out how much we were actually spending on crack seal. Am I going too fast? No? Weed and pest. Personnel increased because of the addition of the weed and pest laborer, previously being compensated out of the streets and alleys. And then in Parks Department, contract services was decreased because we were having employees trim the trees instead of hiring a contractor to perform these services. Vehicle maintenance was increased due to aging equipment, requiring more frequent maintenance and repair. Facilities maintenance line item was increased in several of the funds to repair a leak in the roof of the Public Works shop building. And community development, the overtime was decreased since Job Corps is completed. We had a lot of inspections up there. A new line item was added called contract services to take care of costs associated with boarding up or cleaning up of abandoned or nuisance properties. A books line item was increased to purchase books and software for the 2015 I-codes. Any questions on the expenditures of in the general fund? All right, enterprise funds. City has 3 enterprise funds: water, wastewater, and sanitation. Enterprise funds must generate sufficient revenues to meet their operating obligations. And in all of our enterprise funds, we do meet the 18.5 reserves or more. This particular slide shows the revenues and expenditures in the enterprise funds. This is just the operational budget, not including capital. As you can see, all the enterprise fund revenues exceed expenditures except for the airport, which requires a transfer from the general fund and the use of passenger facilities charges. Airports can charge up to $4.50 on a ticket, which we do. Airports can use these funds to fund FAA-approved projects to enhance safety, security, or capacity, reduce noise, or increase air carrier competition. Monies cannot be transferred from one fund to another without an interfund loan and repayment schedule. These funds are supposed to be self-sufficient. The excess funds goes towards reserves for future capital projects. Any questions? So here are some expenditure highlights in the enterprise funds. In the water fund, electricity line item had increased due to several new pieces of equipment the division operates, such as the 2 booster stations, the well house, and the 2 million gallon water reservoir. Water administration personnel costs decreased as utility billing employees were removed from this cost center and included in the new customer service division. Increases to line items include overtime, professional and consulting, and developer assistance. Overtime is for staff who at times must work weekends on inspections on capital projects. Professional and consulting was increased to receive engineering support for small infrastructure projects, and developer assistance is to help support the improvement or upgrade of utilities associated with private development. In collection and distribution, which covers both water and wastewater, personnel was increased by 2 seasonal laborers. They will assist in providing preventative maintenance to both water and sewer infrastructure. We saw a decrease in uniforms, gas and oil, and new fire hydrant installation. 3 new line items include recruitment, lift station maintenance, and sewer lateral repair. According to our municipal code, the city is responsible to assume the cost of replacing laterals made of unsuitable materials. Several lift stations across the city are aging and requiring more regular maintenance. Everybody understand on the laterals? So if we have unsuitable materials, which is basically that Orangeburg, and that's a section between the property line and the main, if that's made of that type of material, then the city's on the hook to replace that if that's broken. Otherwise, it's the responsibility of the property owner to maintain that all the way out to the main. So we've had a few that have come up where we have had to replace that, and so that's why that line item's been added.
Go ahead. Do you repeat that again? Where the Leesburg is?
Orangeburg?
Orangeburg?
Yeah, so we've deemed that as unsuitable material, meaning it's not proper for sewer laterals to contain Orangeburg, which is like a tightly woven. What I've always looked at, it almost looks like the toilet rings from the toilet paper. It's really tightly woven, but it's like orange. And it surprisingly lasts a long time. But if that section of pipe between the property line and the main fails or is broken, then the city's responsible for that section.
The property line.
Property line.
Of the individual whose line goes into
The main, that's right.
that distance is the liability or the responsibility of the cities. But from that property line back to the source is the owner of the property. Correct?
Correct, only if it's unsuitable materials. So if you had PVC pipe that was running there, that would be suitable materials, so then it would be the responsibility of the property owner. That makes sense? No? Laura, just give me the no. What?
So it's, we're only accepting that if it's Orangeburg.
Yeah, or unsuitable material, which I don't know if there's any others that we've deemed unsuitable.
Your Honor, the technical word is bituminous fiber pipe, which is that Orangeburg. And this is something that is current in our existing code. So basically the default standard is if that lateral is made of C900 pipe or some other type of PVC pipe, it is the property owner's responsibility to maintain that service from their house to the main. But if that lateral is of that Orangeburg pipe, since it's an unsuitable pipe and it's not up to current codes, the city will contribute to the replacement of that. And a lot of times if we were doing a project and knew that our mains were made of that Orangeburg, we'd want to rip that out and replace it. And while we're doing that, laterals to the property lines. We've had this issue come up in the case where laterals have collapsed or been clogged. Want to comply to our code. Being able to pay for that out of a line item is very.
Okay, in wastewater fund, we have decreases in computer supplies, vehicle and equipment maintenance, safety supplies, electricity, and general maintenance. Sanitation funds, we have increase in travel and training, tools and supplies, container rollouts, and building maintenance to help with a leaky roof. Decreases in office supplies and container maintenance. In the tub grinder division, this is where we do all of our green waste. That when you think of a tub grinder that's going around chopping it all up. A decrease in vehicle and equipment maintenance, biosolid screening, gas and oil, and yard waste recycling containers. And in the curbside recycle division, increase in tools and gas and oil. Gas and oil has increased mainly because we've had a number of residents that have participated in that program, so we have more people to go pick up from. Any questions there? Airport fund. We've had a lot of discussions about the airport. So the airport receives revenues from a variety of sources. We have the passenger facilities charge, which is charged each ticket purchased. We receive money from the county commissioners, security grants, gasoline tax, countywide consensus funds, leased rental rentals, such as the airport cafe, hangar lease, and a percentage of the fuel that is sold by the fixed-based operator, which is the FBO. Rent-a-car agencies, Great Lake land fees, TSA lease, DCI lease, grants from federal and state for capital projects in the general fund. So those are all the revenues for the general fund. Expenditures, there is a new line item called property taxes. This is to cover the property taxes on the vacant land at the airport industrial park. Last year was the first year where the county decided that they wanted to charge us for those. And we fought that a little bit. But what they told us is that if you don't have a specific use for that property, then you got to pay property tax on it. And so I guess we have an incentive to get rid of that property and sell it.
The city has to pay tax?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Are all of those, is it improved land?
No. Well, it's, I guess what is the definition of improved?
Well, is there water, sewer, paving, drainage on that land?
Some have paving, not all of them. Some of them have dirt roads.
No, missed my point. Are these lots ready to be built on? I mean, can I put an RX rental store up there right now? And the taps are there, the water's there, the natural gas is there. All I have to do is and I've got a permit because I've got an in with the government. Can I build right now?
Your Honor, I don't believe they have all of those, because each of the ones that have bought properties up there have had to get power to there from either across the street and run different lines. So I think some things are there, but not all of them.
I think if you will check with this county, there is a waiver that we can apply for on that land and not be taxed. Will be taxed, but it'll be cents on the dollar versus dollars on the millions.
Yeah, and we tried. I mean, like I said, we went to them and they said, nope, in our interpretation, you're paying property tax on this.
That's what we have attorneys for.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was in Oregon, the way they defined it is if you were making money on the property, for instance, if the city owned a building and you leased it out to someone, then we pay property tax on it. Other than that, we didn't pay property tax. So I know every state's different, but it's odd to me that we have the purpose of selling it for private development, but they're saying we don't have specific use for it. We're not using them. They're just vacant for sale.
Whereas city property that's used for city purposes is tax exempt.
That's right.
Okay.
So I guess if we could go put some dirt up there and run it around a little bit and then pull some off and...
Salt storage, water storage, containers.
Park a truck on it.
Go ahead, Lee.
How many pieces of property do we have that falls into that category?
There's quite a few up there.
Your Honor, I would estimate that that's 7 or 8 parcels right now, but I'd have to verify.
What? Oh, 422 East Main's the same thing?
What's his use? Parking lot.
Yeah, it's a city parking lot.
It won't allow us to collect rent on or anything else.
So we have about 7 or 8 pieces of property that we're paying sales tax on,
Property tax, yeah.
property tax.
And they're all for sale, is that correct?
That's right. Except the 422, it's not for sale. I think if the city, once we make a decision on the 422, then I think we'd have a clear-cut direction. We can tell the county, we've said we've designated this to be a park or a parking lot, whatever it's going to be. And at that point, that could maybe change, but at this point, it's up in the air as to what it's going to be.
What would you estimate the tax liability on?
Courtney, do you remember what the...
On just 422 East Main?
No.
on all of them?
Pieces of property
Oh.
at the airport.
Up at the airport, about 5,000 or 6,000, right? And Your Honor, that was a new state statute that came into play about a year ago. We have never had to pay those before, but there's not a governmental use tied to the property. We'd filed an exemption, they would not give us an exemption. And there are specific state statutes on what qualifies as an exemption.
Great.
One of them is a subdivision without development. That's a plotted subdivision without development on it.
take some of that dirt from the runway and
Pile it there.
Okay, now we got other funds. We got the Economic Development Fund is for an agreement that was made between the city and the Depot Foundation. The Depot Foundation purchased the land for the Riverwalk, and the city agreed to pay them $2,000 a month until the property's paid off. And then once the property's paid off, the city gets the property.
How far out is that?
We're trying to verify that right now as to exactly what we've paid. We believe about $160,000. Is that right?
Your Honor,
Go ahead.
how much on that economic development fund on the land along the river? How wide of that property? How many acres is there?
It's pretty substantial.
Okay, is
32.
that allowed?
32 acres.
Is that allowed for commercial development, or is it just set aside for a walk down memory lane?
I believe most of that is zone industrial, isn't it?
Next to
Some
the
of it's
river?
industrial, but some of it's outside city limits.
But we own it.
Well, yeah, the Depot Foundation bought it, and we're paying it back, and then we will own it at the end.
Is there any possibility of selling parts of that as for home development or any of that?
I guess,
A couple of years ago, most of that was wet. When we had a flood. Okay, so it's probably, a sizable portion of that's probably floodplain. And it's been mined for gravel. So it's what's left of the gravel pits. Okay, so what happened is there are a couple of pieces of ground down there off of, is it Railroad? Okay, that are subdivided and for commercial. So there's some shops and stuff down there, but it's kind of up on the bench above. And the Riverwalk is the low ground, where there's ponds left behind from the gravel operation and little patches of dirt scattered around in between them.
the 911 fund receives revenues from charges on telephone lines that must be directly used for 911 equipment and maintenance, can't be used for anything else. Fund 12 is for our 1% revenues and expenditures. This will ensure that the money we receive from the 1% sales tax will be kept separate from any other city revenue. We're estimating $2.1 million in revenue, and projects are developed by recommendation from staff and the Force Committee to the City Council. This year we have Neighborhood Concrete Improvement Projects, Americans with Disabilities Act Accessibility Project, Pavement Assessment and Management Plan, chip seals, and asphalt overlays. The city has 8 loans throughout all the funds, 4 in water, 3 in wastewater, and 1 in the airport. Fixed costs. This is always a hard one to predict because it's all over the board. Natural gas prices plummeted this year, but seem to be staying fairly low. We've not increased our utility costs in the funds since we've not seen any proposals for significant increases. Rocky Mountain Power did mention to us that they're planning for another rate increase in January, but that has not been approved by the Public Utility Commission. And then gas prices fell this year and then came back a little. It's just very hard to predict these. Administrative allocations. The administrative allocation provides a $1,192,334 relief to the expense burden of the general fund. Staff has used this tool as a way of administering the true costs of the enterprise funds by an allocation back to the general fund. The true cost of doing business on the enterprise side of the city's budget is very clear and supported by our auditing team. Contract for services. Included in this budget proposal is $377,308 allocated to 9 agency line items within the city budget. All of the funding for contract services requests is taken out of supplemental funding from the state of Wyoming. The city historically has funded contract for services from supplemental funding, and the remaining balance is used for capital projects in the general fund. This is a very good policy since you can't count on these monies each year from the state. This year, each agency filled out a request. It was submitted to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee reviewed the request. Some of the requests asked for less money, others asked for the same as last year, and others asked for increases. The chamber put in a lower request, but the Finance Committee felt that they should not be giving that money away to the other agencies because most likely next year they would be increasing it because of their advertisement budget. The 3 contracts that were asking for additional money were increased. The Children's Advocacy Project was funded an additional $1,000. This thing is Cause and injury prevention were increased by $1,750. And so when we look at that, what they were actually asking for in both of them, pause was short about $5,750 and injury prevention was short $1,500. Now those were both asking for increases from the previous year. Any questions about that? Employee compensation. The City of Riverton is a service-based organization which requires personnel to accomplish our task, and no surprise, that is our largest single category of expenses to provide services to the citizens. Our employees are very important to the organization. They are what makes the organization work. Local governments, which would include counties and cities across the state and nation, have similar benefit packages, salary, health insurance, and some sort of retirement, either a 401k or a defined benefit plan. The reason to stay competitive is we end up losing people to other cities, which is very costly to the organization, particularly with positions that require certain educational requirements or certifications. Out of the 126 employees, 37% are topped at their pay scale. Last year was a difficult year for the employees. There was no cost of living adjustment. Several expenses were passed on to the employees. Increases in health insurance rates, percentage of what employees paid for single coverage was increased from 2% to 10%. The pay scale was extended from 7 steps to 10 steps, which in turn lowers the percentage an employee gets each year. And the increase in the retirement of 1.25% was passed on to the employees for the Wyoming retirement. Staff is proposing the following, which has been included in the budget: annual performance-based merits, cost of living adjustments of 2.5 for captains, division managers, department heads, city administrator, 3.5% increase for all other employees. The reason for the difference in COLA percentages was due to the fact that the higher salaries would still receive a slight dollar amount increase over the lower salaries, but would not have such a large dollar amount difference. This is at a cost of $167,733 to the city. The Wyoming Educators Benefit Trust, which is WebT, has notified that the city will be receiving a 16% increase on health insurance rates. The increase will be absorbed proportionally by both the city and the employee based on the current percentages that we have. With the 16% increase, the total cost to the city is $53,998. Total cost to the employees is $10,649. The Wyoming retirement system has increased the employer's contribution by 0.75% for a total of $5,869. We have received rate increases the past 3 years, and this is the last one for at least another 3 years. Any questions on employee compensation?
Sir, can you tell me, what do you base your COLA adjustment on? I mean, I know in the military, they base it on like the inflation rate over a 3-month period, like July, August, September. What did you?
We really just kind of based it on what we thought we could handle and afford is really the basis of it. Because we looked at last year in how much we passed on to the employees. And so this year we were really trying to do something for the employees to make up for that. Any other questions?
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So COLA does not have a formula. Cost of living does not come from some index from the federal government.
There are CPIs that you can look at that you can go off of.
Question.
The what?
Question is, do we have a specific formula? Does the city of Riverton have a specific COLA formula that we look at?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
So this little chart here, this is for health insurance. And so you can see we have a variety of different plans that we offer our employees. We have the employee-only plan, and this is based on the 3 years, so fiscal year 13-14, 14-15, and then the budget that we're going into. And so you can see the percentage the city pays compared to what the employee pays on each of them. Obviously on the employee, right now it's a 90-10. Employee plus dependents is 85-15. Employee plus spouse is 80-20, and the family is 75-25. And so that just shows the cost that the employee is paying per month for their health insurance. And currently, we have 64 people enrolled on the employee-only plan. Employee independent, we have 16. Employee plus spouse, we have 13. And the family plan, we have 17. Any questions? I'd like to applaud the council in their efforts to set aside reserves of 18.5%. Reserves are the lifeboat when revenue streams take a sudden plunge or when we have a disaster or major equipment failure that requires money now. As stated in the budget, the 18.5% is of operations. All funds are projected to have the 18.5% except for the airport and have additional money available for future capital projects. So in conclusion, the work of the City of Riverton is important, even critical. Its projects have a profound impact on the quality of the daily lives of its citizens. Preparation of the proposed budget has been a team effort. The management team has approached the budget preparation in a spirit of interdepartmental cooperation with a firm grasp on the fiscal reality. I would like to recognize the help of our department heads, Courtney, Mike, Kyle, and Sandy, and special kudos to Courtney and Gloria for all their time and effort. What the plan is for this budget is to bring this in front of the council on June 2nd, which should be our first regular meeting in June, and to adopt the budget. Any questions?
That's it.
That's it.
Go ahead, Mr. Larson.
Steve? Could you go back one picture on the health services? Do we have any foreseeable raises coming in the future on any of these plans? And if so, are we looking for a different carrier, or our carrier is ourself, or what?
Yeah, our carrier is WebT, which is the Wyoming Educator Benefit Trust. There's essentially, I don't know if there's, WAM JPEG we were with them originally and we got out of them. We've typically found that WebT is a better option, both on service and costs. We don't have a lot of options. Some of the larger cities self-insure, but they don't recommend that until you're at least like 500 employees.
The reason I'm asking is Waste Management over there have 52 employees, and somehow by going to Blue Cross Blue Shield and getting out of the county health services, they were saving money.
Yeah, and WebT is through Blue Cross Blue Shield. There's the administrator of that, but it goes through Blue Cross Blue Shield. What I found in Wyoming is there's very few providers. In other states, you have a whole bunch to choose from, and they really have a monopoly here in the state of Wyoming. I was hoping that the state of Wyoming would allow us to get on their plan, because they were talking about it in the last legislature of allowing counties to join on that, but the cities weren't an option at the time. Because obviously the bigger the pool gets, the better it works out for everybody. And if you try to self-insure, you can often save some monies, but then you have the issue of big claims and you're on the hook for all of it.
Well, you get a catastrophic illness and hello.
Yeah. And that's why we made the change in ways of percentages. If you look on the employee plan, it used to be in 13-14, we paid 98% of an employee's health insurance, 2% they only had to pay, and that's what we're talking about. We made that adjustment last year, so that moved from 2 to 10. We're trying to get that more in line so that everyone's paying an equal amount, so we're not encouraging just single people to come work for the city. We want a variety of people to come work. And I've found in looking at that, a lot of cities will have those percentages exactly the same across the board. Doesn't matter if you have a family, a single, or dependent. It's a percentage across the board. But that's how it's set up here, and we made that change last year, which I think was a good one, but it was kind of a hit to some of the employees.
Well, doesn't the Affordable Care Act require employees to pay a certain percentage of their premium now? Otherwise, they get fined.
That's right, Your Honor. They have a Cadillac, I think it's Cadillac tax, I think they call it. And so if you're paying too much, then you get penalized for that. But we don't meet that threshold.
Don't have that good of insurance, huh? Just have Chevy insurance. Have the Ford plan, okay. Anybody have any more questions or?
I have one comment. When we had Blue Cross Blue Shield, we found out that it was cheaper to go to WebT and get better service. We did have Blue Cross Blue Shield, but every year they kept raising the costs, so that's why we went to WebT. That's all I have.
I guess I could make an official announcement that Holly Gibbon has been appointed to be on the rec board, and I have been relieved from that duty. And so she's all ready to go to the meeting on Monday. And does anybody have anything else that they would like to bring up that they need to? There's Thursday evening is FCAG, and did you get my email? I sent out. I'm going to be out of town, so I won't be able to attend that meeting. It's going to be at Swigler's in Hudson. If somebody on the council wants to go to FCAG in my place, they're welcome to do so.
What day is it?
It's Thursday night. Well, the meeting starts at 6 o'clock. Yeah, the way that works is you have to, you know, everybody pays their own dinner bill, but, you know, you can get that reimbursed by the city. But it's, and they try to meet in a different community every month. So I've been doing that, and you know, like last month we had a pretty good discussion on ambulance service, and you know, the difference between 1 cent sales tax initiative to fund it and the establishment of a rural health care district. And so occasionally they have something of interest. This month will be a discussion about DEQ brownfield cleanups. So just like what our experience was on 442 Main. Okay,
Your Honor.
go ahead.
One comment, just budget-wise, I think that it should be on the council's radar that the senior endowment is dwindling, and so they are talking about trying to get some sort of a ballot initiative to help replenish that, but the city may need to, if there's anything we can do. I mean, I think based on the current burn rate and the current interest rate, there's probably a couple of years left in that endowment where they'll be at the bottom threshold that they are supposed to not go below. So just so it's on everybody's radar, it may be coming.
Go ahead.
Is that because of low interest rates and longevity that's occurring? Or is it just we didn't think that we'd have 12% interest rates invest in, or what?
It really does come down to low interest rates. That fund, its sole purpose is to basically go to the facility. So maintenance, utilities, it doesn't run the operations of the senior center. It simply keeps the building going, and that was an endowment that was put in place back when the citizens voted to put that in place. And ours is actually in a little bit worse shape than some of the others in the county. I think most of them are getting down, but we were the only one where that money was actually used to purchase property and then build. In Lander, it was used to build, but they didn't purchase property. And in Shoshone, they didn't do either. They actually remodeled an existing building over there. And I'm not sure about Du Bois. Didn't get a good feel on that. But anyway, so ours is in a little worse shape than some around, but it's just one of those things. I think they're all dwindling over time because of low interest.
So you're saying that we're going to propose, or they're going to propose, or what will be the future proposal?
They were going to go and meet with FCAG and see if there's options and kind of take it from there.
I think they're looking at another 1 cent sales tax to try to
Special facilities.
to generate that.
Yeah, Your Honor, they were initially talking about approaching the mayors to see if they could get a portion of the 1% that's going to infrastructure, because they wouldn't need an additional 1 penny, because right now what they get is about $70,000 a year from us. That's what keeps dwindling down. And so it's not a substantial amount of money. The other grants cover all their other operations. But I guess if we could figure out a way to cut down on the energy costs there, that would put it a little bit longer. That's what we were talking about, is trying to find grants to supplement these things, and that's what FCAG staff was going to look into to see if we can find some other options. But yeah, something's going to have to be done, because 881,000 is the threshold it can't go below. Because when I first got here, I think they were over $1 million. But if you had good interest rates, you'd make a sizable amount. But it's pennies. It's like $200 a year they're getting in interest.
Nobody's paying interest.
Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up in case it's not for this year, but it may come up in years to come. Thanks.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.